think the pandemic has made people think about what's that type of role that they might want. So the help that was available was less good for self-employed people. It was, in my opinion, it was unfair. If the high earners were penalised for the fact that they were high earners, so didn't get as much, didn't get any help. So that won't have helped getting people back into the industry afterwards. But not only that, I think that the population like working at home and like that flexibility of being able to work from home. And you can't teach swimming from home. It doesn't happen. You can't. So that it's got its own incentives and reasons why people want to do it. But working at home is not one of them, unfortunately.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Drive Phase podcast from Coordinate Sports, your show about sports founders, leaders, and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Today's episode is slightly different, so we have a different format, panel discussion, focusing on the swimming activity sector, predominantly in the UK, but we've got plenty of global guests on the show today. So joining me for a panel discussion was Paul Thompson from Water Babies, Joe Stone from Puddle Ducks, and Julianne James from Aquababies Global. We had a great conversation debating some of the current issues in the industry, from energy bills and how they're affecting us, access to swimming pools, the lack of swimming pools in the UK specifically, and also a good conversation around recruitment, which I think is affecting every industry, especially the sports activity industry. So yeah, great episode. If you're in the space, always great to learn from leaders and leading organisations and seeing how they're doing things, and hopefully we can use some of that to improve our operations. So yeah, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. If you feel you can, always welcome any feedback, so leave any messages in the comments, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you see all our episodes as they come out weekly. But yeah, please enjoy the show. Okay, so I'm really excited to welcome you all to another episode of the Drive Phase podcast. This time it's a little bit different for us today. We've got a panel of really privileged to have the experts of a specific niche within our children's activity sector, which is baby swimming. And I'm really delighted to welcome our guests today. So we've got Joe Stone, Julianne James and Paul Thompson to the show today. We're going to be going through a wide-ranging discussion on the sector, but really niching down into baby swimming and hopefully bringing some insights from their vast experience. So I want to kick it off really with looking at, I guess we'll start with the negatives, but we'll start the negatives of the challenges facing the industry at the moment. And I don't know if you want to go first, Joe, but I think, would you be able to kind of, from your take, just look at what you think the biggest challenges are right now to the sector, swimming sector, but really baby swimming as a niche?
Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest challenges that we have is the huge demand for the lessons from parents, but perhaps not enough facilities and teachers to give those lessons that we want. So one of the things that we're working on is trying to find a way of getting better facilities around the UK and helping our franchisees create those pools and environments for them to be able to teach the lessons in themselves. Yeah, it's a really challenging environment to find pools and those are a high enough standard to be able to teach our lessons in.
So I guess all of you kind of operate on the same model when sourcing the pools, but what are your kind of go-to locations? I know it's health clubs or is it hotels? And I suppose where do public pools fit into that? Because that's generally you hear about pools closing every week, right? So I don't know if you want to, sorry, Joe.
We use pools, any pools are suitable really. So there can be community pools, hotel pools, school pools, you name it. Tend not to use the public leisure centres quite as much because they tend to be not quite as warm for what we need for our lessons. But yeah, as you say, pools are being closed all the time because of high maintenance costs, high energy costs, particularly at the moment. So it's definitely not an easy environment to be in.
Yeah, what about you, Paul? Do you want to pick up on that one in terms of, I know you mentioned energy there, but yeah, pools and the demand is a huge challenge for yourselves as well.
Yeah, same. I mean, I echo Joe. It's really hard to find water space. The cost of living crisis at the moment, everything we're going through at the moment has just compounded that. So we've got pools now which are struggling to stay open, and particularly the pools that we're interested in, which is the warm water pools. They're really struggling because their energy costs are significantly higher. So some of them are closing or they're reducing the amount of time that they're making available. And also just the stock of pools in Britain generally is getting old and fewer pools are built annually. And again, particularly the sort of pools that we're looking for in our sector. So there's a diminishing stock of swimming pools. There's just a real pressure on water space generally. Just like Joe, we too are looking at different solutions just to try and combat that, getting our own facilities. But that's also challenging now with the cost of everything going the way it is. Actually trying to build a pool economically to make it commercially viable is really, really difficult now, particularly over the last year. So challenge on water space is a real problem. There's a huge demand. Again, as Joe says, there's a huge demand for what we do. But getting water space is really challenging. And again, also echo teachers, just a general supply of labour across all sectors in this country at the moment is catastrophic. And it's really, really hard to find people. Just where have they all gone? Where have the people gone? So just trying to find people to be teachers is unbelievably difficult. So you've got this huge demand, and trying to get people to be teachers and to find the water space is a challenge.
We'll definitely circle back on the recruitment and retention issue, because I think that not just in, like I said, in swimming, I think that's, like you said, across all sectors and all sectors in children's activity. Finding those great staff is a challenge. Challenges around energy costs and heating the pools, etc. Julian, I don't know if that's as much of a challenge for you, being like at the moment over in Queensland, heating pools, is that as much of a challenge over there, and is it the same challenging?
Well, I've been trying to vary and facilitate building your own pools for other companies, really. I'm branching out more to not just the franchise side, but the consultancy side, and trying to get collaborations with, from physiotherapists to alternative aquatic activities, and seeing if they want to merge together to be able to fund pools. As both the guests just said, it's the heating costs. It's okay having all the collaboration, it's the energy. But I'm hopefully, funding is becoming more readily available, and hopefully solutions are on the way. But again, as we've just briefly, it's universal, the lack of teachers. I don't know why it's not such an attractive career when we find it an amazing career, but hopefully solutions are coming along the way, hopefully. All we can do is live in hope.
Definitely. Well, it feels like, obviously there's those major challenges, but they feel like they're created by the opportunity, which is the demand, right? So I think the product that you all offer, it's a unique one in terms of, it's definitely a life skill, right? So every parent wants their child to be able to swim. You've always got that memory from the past, of however you learned, whether it was positive or negative. So that demand that you're facing, like, how are you managing it or scaling up to be able to take it? So pools is a huge issue. Is that just basically limiting the number of places you can offer, or is there a way that you can kind of increase that without the new facilities?
Well, it's hard, isn't it? So there's a huge demand. There's a problem in the infrastructure to meet the demand. So I think it's a nice problem to have. We're all experiencing our ability to try and access all of these clients is being a real challenge. And we clearly do what we keep on doing, which is trying to find innovative ways to get water time, to get teachers. But I think it's testament to the sector that there is this demand. That hasn't relented, and even in the cost of living crisis, that hasn't relented. People still see this as a life skill, still want to get their kids swimming. It's just trying to find infrastructure, and I find it completely infuriating because government don't think about this at all. They don't see the importance of health and prevention of health at the beginning, and don't invest in it. And swimming pools, for example, were one of the sectors that weren't seen as a priority in the UK. With the government's funding support packages, it wasn't seen as a necessary sector, but libraries were. Go figure. So it's just very, very difficult. But look, on the upside, there is a demand. There's a demand.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, recently, in terms of the shake-up, they're not being given that classification. I guess, what's the most innovative solution you've seen? Is there anything where you think that's an untapped area of, like you said, water spaces, somewhere we really want to kind of get into that sector? I guess hotels are widely used now. Is there any other spaces that you would love to be able to access but are struggling to get hold of? Joe, if you got any thoughts on that one?
I think we just keep on looking. If there's, retirement homes, I do think that there's some kind of synergy there that, if they've got a pool to be able to use it with the old people and the young people, combining use of it, both need warm pools. There ought to be some kind of collaboration there. And I know that's something we're looking at in one of our franchise territories. So I'm sure that's something we'll explore a lot more once we find that works really well. But it seems right to me that it ought to work. Retirement villages and older people.
Yeah, it feels like a good synergy, right?
And
kind of intergenerational. Yeah. What about you, Julian? I know you say
We'll take a pool wherever there is one.
I think that's just it, isn't it? Anything that's warm and clean. I mean, we used to use a lot of leisure centres, but they just can't afford to maintain the temperatures and the staffing problems as well. So, as I said, I've been trying to work with physios and a lot of people that actually have access to warm pools, and see if they want to collaborate to build your own pool options on smaller scales. But again, that's just, everything's questionable at the moment. We're just funding. And as Paul, if we had some more government backup, it would be the solution. It should be classified for me as an essential skill. It's something that's really important for the society, for well-being. It should be recognised as that.
Paul, I know when we spoke last, we talked about, I'm sure everyone did, but the kind of things you did in the pandemic in terms of kind of online education and those, I guess, almost helping people to deliver some type of education to their children at home. Is that still something that's, I guess, on the cards, or something that's pushed that you're looking at doing, maybe some more remote training to be able to scale up at all?
Yeah, it's still part of the service that we have, is a sort of the big giving back part to Waterbabies. So, we have a lot of online videos that service that people can access all over the world, actually, to do basic stuff at home, in the bath and so on. I still remember a Waterbabies lesson in the shower during the pandemic. That was a first. So, anything to try and do that. But that's always going to be at the margins in the nicest way. There's nothing, obviously, what really counts is getting somebody in a proper bit of water and training them properly. Anything you do outside of that is on the edges, albeit it has a value. So we're always looking to do those sorts of things. But the core focus is trying to get water time and get people in the pool. That's the core focus.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any substitute for that, is there?
Yeah.
No, face-to-face is the magic, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And
the health benefits.
Obviously, the demand's there from the consumer, from parents, for sure. What about, I guess, franchise sales and franchise development and growth? Are you seeing any, I guess, trends or specific demographics or locations where there's growth there? Or is it just you have huge demand and you can't fill it unless you've got the pool space? I don't know, Joe, for you.
I think, like a lot of the franchise industry, it's quite difficult to recruit at the moment, with the economy being the way it is in the UK. We have taken on one or two franchises since the pandemic, but it's certainly quite slow going, and it takes a while for us to nurture the leads and convince them, particularly during a cost of living crisis, that it's the right thing to do. Resales have been really strong during that time, so our existing network are very keen to expand and buy other territories, but getting new blood in has been more of a challenge, for sure.
When there's an economic downturn, franchising tends to pick up as generally as a sector, because it's seen as a safer space to go. But these circumstances are particularly unique, so it is tougher for people to make commercial decisions to go and invest in any business, whether it's a franchise business or a non-franchise business, when there's so much economic uncertainty. But we, like Joe, we've still had some. We still take on people, and we've still got, particularly internally, people taking on Waterbabies franchises. So that's happening. But yeah, it's definitely slower than it was pre all of this kerfuffle over the last couple of years. It's more challenging.
Julianne, do you think that's because people are trying to diversify their offerings to say, like, maybe I need to be able to offer and be busy all day or into the evenings, etc.?
And I think the parents are looking for something else. It is quite a saturated market, but both Joe and Paul's companies are amazing. They deliver high quality, so that's the difference. But now the parents, they need something. They like variety, give back to the community, health and well-being programs, just the way our existing model provides that, but how we can adapt that to add, other programs as well, other concepts. It makes an overall package.
Paul, are you seeing that globally as well? Obviously, I know you're working across loads of territories. Do you see the same type of downturn, or is it looking in different countries, if that makes sense?
No, one of the good things about being kind of spread around the world is we do have you come across different scenarios. So actually, it's not the same everywhere. Similar, but not the same. So we've got some of our territories which are stronger than others, are less affected. The UK economy is particularly acutely affected, not just because of everything else that's going on, but the mini budget, of course, and Brexit, of course, the elephant that's always in the room. The reality of that, regardless of people's politics, is it has made the British economy more challenging than other economies. So, for example, our franchisees in Canada aren't struggling as much because the economy there is not as bad. The Irish economy is much, much stronger than the UK economy. In fact, their government's actually got a surplus in the bank in their last budget. So there's a massive demand for our service in Ireland, which we simply can't meet because of pools and clients again, but we could really grow there. So but we're also in China, and that's a complete car crash because of the constant lockdowns that they've been having all over the place. I mean, it's been absolutely horrific. So it really varies around the world. So one of the benefits we have had is that we've been able to ride the wave a little bit better because all of our eggs aren't in one basket. 25% of our business is outside of the UK. So that's been helpful, without a doubt. So it is different in different places.
So it sounds like we need to tap up Ireland for some funding for those pools then, right? So if they've got that
money,
Yeah.
No, sorry, I interrupted you, Paul. Sorry.
Well, it's interesting. I think you do get very focused. I mean, Julie, Anne's probably got this in Australia. If you're obviously based in the UK, you get very focused on the UK market. But the world's a big place, and they have different things that are going on. And I think people are quite surprised when we say to them, actually, the economy in Ireland's doing really, really well.
It's surprising to me, actually. I never knew that.
It's really surprising to people. And actually, their government invests. Another one that's interesting, and actually, is their government invests in child support. So people get better child benefit support when they have a baby. And what we find is they take a lot of that cash and put it straight into their swimming lessons. So so it's different in different places.
I've got a question around kind of inclusivity, right? So obviously we know all commercial operators and baby swimming is expensive and it's kind of increasing in cost. Your cost base is always increasing, whether it's wages, whether it's underlying energy costs, access, exclusivity to pools, etc. Is there anything where you think, like you just mentioned that what they're doing in Ireland, I don't know if there's anything you think the government could do, or there's a way of kind of bringing the lesson, obviously without the infrastructure, but then from the other side in terms of cost, is there a way of kind of making the lessons more inclusive or bringing more people who might not be able to afford it, but like you said, it's a life skill. I don't know, Joe, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, we try to make things as inclusive as possible, and we do have classes in all sorts of areas around the country. So in some and the class, we obviously can't stipulate the price of classes. So in some areas of the country, the classes are a little bit cheaper. But yeah, it is difficult. There's a lot of costs associated with running the classes. I know some franchisees do have a little bit of a bursary scheme going on, but they are few and far between. We try to have as many videos available so as many children can get involved in the lessons as possible, so they can use those skills when they go locally to their own leisure centres, things like that. It is difficult.
I guess it's probably good to touch on the workforce angle now in terms of what we mentioned, and touch on what you said, Paul, like where's everyone gone? For me, looking at the industry, it's really difficult because you kind of think recession or downturn, economic downturn, you'd be expecting that there'd be kind of huge unemployment or whatever it be. But when we look at the kind of vacancy rate, everyone we speak to, and like you mentioned there, everyone's got a huge amount of vacancies and kind of no one applying. I don't know whether, and this might be opinion or maybe you have some data behind it, but what kind of everyone's thoughts on the reasons behind it, and if you've got a take on that. I'll go to you first, Paul.
Yeah, I got a few. None of them particularly scientifically backed. I think Brexit's had a huge effect. I think that's massively underplayed. I think politically now it's only just starting to be spoken about. And regardless of whether people thought it was a good thing or a bad thing, I'll put my cards on the table. I thought it was a catastrophic thing. But regardless of whether people thought that or not, the reality is that's where we are now. But we're still not having growing up conversations about how we should deal with the aftermath of it and what it means for us practically. So I think the fact that a lot of people haven't come back to the UK from Europe and there isn't ease of movement of employment is a case. And I can actually, interesting, even in our business, I can think of a number of Eastern European teachers that we used to have over the years, and that's completely dried up. That's interesting. That's a real one. That doesn't help. And I think a lot of people have just given up work, haven't they? COVID has, people in their 50s, COVID has gone, they've looked at COVID and gone, actually, you know what, my time at work is done. I can actually retire now. I'm going to step out of the workplace. We have a number of teachers who are in their 50s historically as well. We can't access those people now because people go back into the workplace. And then I think the last one is just opportunity, because there's such a dearth of people out there to do the jobs. There's a lot of opportunity. So when people are looking at what they want to do for a part-time career or whatever, swimming is just fighting amongst a plethora of other opportunities that are out there for people. So it's hard to convince those people to come and swim. And swimming is not people's first thought anyway, even in the best of times. So there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah, for sure. Any other thoughts, Joe?
I think Paul's right. I mean, the Brexit issue was kind of really swept under the carpet with it claimed to be COVID issues, and those people who would have come have been filled by other jobs, and there's just not the people around there's not enough people to do the workload that we've got in the UK, or not enough willing people to be working. I think the pandemic has made people think about what's that type of role that they might want. So the help that was available was less good for self-employed people. It was, in my opinion, it was unfair. If the high earners were penalised for the fact that they were high earners, so didn't get as much, didn't get any help. So that won't have helped getting people back into the industry afterwards. But not only that, I think that the population like working at home and like that flexibility of being able to work from home. And you can't teach swimming from home. It doesn't happen. You can't. So that it's got its own incentives and reasons why people want to do it. But working at home is not one of them, unfortunately.
And that's not just in the UK, it's universal. It's here in Australia. I mean, I've just recently been in Cyprus and working over there. It doesn't seem to be such an attractive job for the youth or for any age group. But I do think, having tax relief in the UK, or as Joe pointed out, as a self-employed, it's difficult. When you've got your insurances on top. Insurance is also another factor for deduction from the wages. So it's a universal problem. I think it just doesn't seem to be as attractive, but it's a wonderful job. So, I think it needs to be promoted as such.
Yeah, and I guess looking forward, how we kind of tackle that in your organisations, doing anything differently? Like, is it a push to kind of look for younger people, kind of train them up, or look for other, let's say, complementary careers and try and recruit from there? Or what's the kind of approaches? Hopefully, get some takeaways. A lot of our listeners are in the same boat as you guys. Obviously, they're all running businesses and searching for stuff.
We'd love to take on some apprentices, but really struggling to find interest, and they're getting so far and then deciding, I don't want to be an apprentice. So that's really challenging. I really think that we've got a lot to offer for that age
Joe,
group.
is that a challenge for you with, I guess, the way that, obviously for an apprenticeship, normally that'll be a full-time job. Is it a case that is it difficult to fit in and around the program?
I think it'd have to be in conjunction with some admin type role as well. But we're finding it really difficult to find an apprentice program that is aligned to doing something like that. So the only ones that we've been able to find at the moment are to do with gyms, and we don't have gym equipment or personal trainers in our business, so we can't offer that to an apprentice. But there ought to be a swim teacher apprentice that we could then pick up on.
Yeah, there's some synergies. I mean, we're speaking with so bikeability, cycle training. So some synergies, obviously not poolside, but the kind of similar models for businesses. And I know they're exploring, or they have launched one that's kind of a cycle instructor apprentice, because they're trying to, I guess, redefine the demographic of their teachers. So a lot of them, like also, might be in their 50s, and it's kind of an aging workforce. And they're thinking, right, we need to be bringing some more younger instructors. But that's a great idea. Is it an actual push for that, or is there a challenge with teachers that are like apprentice level, whereas they haven't got the experience, or maybe the life experience, and to be a great teacher?
They would need a lot of training to make it work, but I believe that we could do that over time. Just need to find the right people.
Yeah. Another approach that I've been discussing recently is for the youth is trying to create a lot of gyms and centres that have the youth that need work, is collaborating swimming coaching with gym coaching. So they've got a dual role. So it's not just focused on one sector. And that seems to be appealing, a little bit more appealing, or whether it be the gym or whatever preferred sport that could be inclusive within for a leisure centre, for example, or even hotels with leisure clubs. If they could get a job that was combined, it seems to have a more of interest, because even the youth working in gyms, that turnover there is huge as well. They can't seem to maintain staff. So perhaps creating roles that could be dual may be a solution.
Yeah, to kind of creating that more sustainable full-time career, but share the fund and fund it through two organisations.
Yeah, a combination of health and fitness. It's not just one sector. Why don't you combine these into have your overall ideal job? Just a thought.
So we're looking at those sort of things. We've got a huge project we're in the middle of now, which is completely starting again of what it means to be a teacher and what that career looks like, and to repackage how we go out to people. So we're looking at apprentices, we're looking at mixed roles like Julianne's saying, and a number of other things as well, to actually go, look, how do you make this really, really attractive to people of all ages and offer them something that's completely different? And that's not just salary as well, it's about opportunity and the excitement of the role.
Yeah.
And we're starting to put that together.
And we all know the mental health and well-being of being in a sector that promotes fitness, that needs to be inclusive of what the package entails. Like, it's mentally and physically ideal to work in a job that you're satisfied with,
I think we need to, rather than looking at just being a swimming teacher for so many hours a week, we're definitely looking at packages where you can be other things, whether it's pool operating or doing some customer admin or marketing or something, so that it's a more substantial role. Like it seems to me that people don't necessarily want a small role, they want more of a full-time role, perhaps. I don't know.
So kind of want to see that progression, career progression.
Yeah.
So when we talk about training, I know Paul, you touched on it there, that you're kind of redefining what that looks like for an instructor. Historically, has it just been, I guess, the entry to the market? Is it simply one or two qualifications, or how has that kind of increased? Because we've seen it in other sides of the sector where effectively there's more and more demands on training and CPD, etc. But maybe the salary or the wages or the career progression hasn't kept up with it, if that makes sense. It's almost like a super high skilled position, but you're not really seeing that in the kind of in the take home pay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because it takes a lot to become a water baby teacher. The training is huge. It's a large program. It takes a long time. It's a real commitment. So the qualification is challenging to get. And interestingly, what we're finding is like a big part of our training is a residential. People have to come and spend 7 days with us in a residential as part of the process. And what we're finding, I don't know, it's just a change in generation or whatever it happens to be, that people don't want to put that effort in. They want the process to be easier. So when they see what it takes, they lose interest in the process. They want it to be easier. And that goes back to the point we were making earlier about there being lots of jobs out there for people and lots of choices. And you could be looking at, becoming a water baby teacher, for example, and doing something else and going, well, actually, I can just walk into that other thing over there. I don't have to go and do loads of training. So we are looking at ways of not diluting the training, but doing the training in different ways, so that it's more accessible to and more palatable for this sort of this generation, but also making it attractive for them to go through training. So it's part of the role, it's part of the job, and seeing it more that way. So we're coming up with lots of ideas to try and combat that. Quite a bit of success actually, and it's working. But yeah, it's hard to get people to want to put the effort in to get to where they need to get to, whether it's swimming or anything else these days, it seems to me. And that's sort of, I think the danger of that is, you're old and regeneration says the same thing, people are lazy. I don't think it's that at all. I just think there's a different mindset to how people work now. And I think COVID has just accelerated that. We just touched on people want to work from home, for example, and that's really appealing to people. So the whole environment of work has changed fundamentally, and swimming has got to adapt. Enticing people to become swimming teachers, you've got to adapt and do that completely radically.
I think our training program's very similar to water babies. It's very intensive and it takes a lot, and it's almost that fear of failure. There's assessments and things like that all associated with it, and I guess people are worried about not passing it and failing, and even though there's a support there to be able to achieve those pass rates, it's certainly not unachievable, but it's that perception of people don't want to be given negative feedback and try and get better, and it's only there to help them get better. It's not there as a personal criticism or anything like that, and I think that's maybe one of the issues that's causing problems in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, the whole industry, you've got a huge duty of care, right, in terms of teaching babies how to swim. There's a lot of risk involved, I suppose, if you're not fully trained. So sorry, Julianne, you're gonna
exactly, yeah.
I think, as we just said, we have to adapt. Even our training models, I've become a little bit more flexible, but yet really quality assurance is really important to me. But creating new resources, that's one thing. Being in the pandemic, I had to deliver quite a lot of training as a consultant around the world. My first job was actually in Wuhan, but I didn't get there. But I've created resources that are accessible, and we, having the beauty of having Zoom and personal Zoom is not ideal in a time scale for training, but just having different options, and what I'm trying to do now is allow them to have that lesson plan that we've always had, but to inspire their creative edge. So even though we have our themes and our aims and objectives, how can we inspire you to put your stamp on it while still being in the same curriculum? And it gives them that little bit of freedom that way, a little bit of flexibility, so it's not so rigid, So I find adapting is working for me at the moment.
So almost taking ownership of their own education, if you know what I mean.
Yes, but still having the foundations. The foundations are really important. The aims and objectives, we've got to have a point of difference. Your teaching points, your education, it's all a part of it. But also giving them that, now we've got learn by play and sensory. We can utilize all these different concepts within the same lesson plan. That's one of my main themes. I've always been able to adapt like that. We've got a little bit more room to play. And that seems to be more attractive to new teachers.
I know there's been like some initiatives in terms of training, and is it the STA still funding some instructor training courses, things like that? Have you felt any benefit from that at the moment in terms of anything coming through, any money that's been spent on kind of accredited qualifications or access to funding those? Are you seeing that kind of the new teachers coming into the industry at all through there?
We have used the STA funded courses, and they've helped to a certain extent, but they were possibly people who are going to come into the industry anyway. I think you could argue. I don't think that's necessarily enticed them into the industry.
So it's kind of helping. It's helping the people that once you find someone, it's helping you to train them, but it's finding them in the first place.
Yeah, correct. That's only a minute part of our training. We do an awful lot of training after they've done the STA course as well.
So I'm really interested. Obviously, from our background, being a software provider, we're always interested in technology and whether you are using or how you're using technology in the practice or in business. Have you got any? I'm assuming, Paul, you might have a pet project of some type of AI robot swimming teacher that you can roll out across globally or something like that. Maybe we're too far ahead. That might fix all of our problems. But yeah,
a waterproof robot.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Just give me a good idea there.
Put that down, register that one. Yeah, I mean, in terms of technology, it'd be interesting to hear how all the different organisations that you're leading are kind of using that, and it'd be good to hear any good takeaways. So, Paul, I'll touch on it with yourself.
Yeah, we're investing an awful lot in tech, a huge amount, and keeps me awake at night actually. And that's just to make the role, from a teaching point of view, so that's what we'll be talking about first. That's to make their role as easy as possible. So for a long time, all water babies teachers have had tablets, which are integral to their role. But getting the services that we provide our teachers through that platform is changing fundamentally. We're really just accelerating that. So making things like lesson planning a lot easier, resourcing a lot easier, all the admin that goes around being a swimming teacher, so much easier, instantaneous, etc. That's just accelerated away in the last 18 months. We actually started investing a lot over COVID. We took COVID as more than nightmare that COVID was. We took it as an opportunity. There was some downside. So actually, let's do some of the infrastructure projects that you otherwise wouldn't do. And so from that point of view, we've been doing a lot of that. Just our tech generally, our client-facing tech is also changing. And we're going to look very, very different in 12 months' time, the speed that we're going in terms of tech. So tech is really important at modernising the service right across the board. So for our teachers, for our clients, training as well. Again, we see a lot of that online in using tech, and that's just accelerating. So in all aspects of our business, we're going, how can it be done more simply and better? And it's funny, actually, when you really think about it, just what those areas can be, things you never thought about before. Actually, that could be a tech solution to that. And so we're doing more and more and more of that. So yeah, big part of what we're doing.
Great stuff. Anyone else? Are you using that maybe as teaching aids and things like that? Is anyone else using technology to kind of improve that or make more efficiency?
Yeah, we use a lot of technology. We have done. We're in our 21st year this year, and we've always used some kind of tech to help do our processes. So our current system's been live for about 5-6 years, I think now, and we're always improving it. And I think that the latest round is to help with some of the client compliance, making sure that we can upload all of our teachers' certificates and CPD sessions, so that we know that everybody's done the right number of training sessions each year. It goes all the way through from the customers using the phones or mobile devices to be able to access the child's progression through the program, to the teachers being able to update that progress and see the registers and everything, all the way through to the office staff who can book the customers in, or the customers can self-service and book their own classes in. So yeah, tech's a big part, and it is a big part of the training that we do as well through our e-learning system, with all the videos and everything that we've got in place to help train our teachers and office people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from our side, we're always banging the drum for kind of digital adoption, and every business at some stage in the future is going to be kind of digital first. So it's kind of getting out ahead of it. So it's good that you guys are like leading in the industry.
It changes so quickly too. As soon as you design one process, something better comes up. So you go, oh, it's.
There's always some improvement to do.
Exactly. And Julian, are you seeing that, I guess, across the consultancy side of things that you're doing there? What are you seeing there in terms of technology? I'm thinking more around maybe more like infrastructure technology? So like if you're building pools and things like that, is there any kind of energy efficiencies in there, or even like self-contained facilities, solar, or that type of stuff for keeping the cost down as well?
It depends again on a lot of countries I work in. It's affordable to build pools and they can afford heating systems. But in the UK and Australia, it's again down to costings of energy. It doesn't matter what we put, solar panels, or it's still the overall package that's costing. You know, the electricity and anything we need to warm the pool is a problem at the moment, and that's just a fact, unfortunately. But when it comes to tech filtration, that's different. That's cutting down costs. That's cutting down manpower. But it has to be reliable. I mean, it's picking the right concepts, the right technology, and that has to be tried and tested. So that can be a risk as well, you know.
I guess for me, this is more of an opinion question, but is there anything that you have when you look at the sector and you think, if I could just change one thing, or maybe we've touched on it already, or it might be a pet peeve of yours, is there something that you would, for each of you, that you'd kind of pick out and say, that's what, if I could change anything, this is one thing I'd do overnight and it would fix a lot of my issues?
For me, government support, trying to shake some people to say, help us.
Do you mean in terms of just opinion, in terms of perception from the government of what the industry's doing?
Well, I think just energy costs, getting more apprenticeships and making packages for staff that are affordable, helping with insurances, helping with tax relief, anything to try and get people into the workforce in a job in the sporting fields, especially swimming, you know. That's a problem. We all want pool space, but we can't afford to run the pools. Help us, you know.
Yeah, I echo that. I think it's government would be the number one thing. I mean, there's some governments around the world. I think the Dutch have done this, where their health service is actually linked to sport. I think it's health and sport is their health department, isn't it? And they've realised the connection between getting people prevention rather than cure, getting people fit and building in those good behaviours from the get-go will save you in the long term in your health service. And if you look at sport in this country, it's a small government department over in the left-hand corner. It's a piddly little thing. It's just not put together. And swimming is not only just a mass participation sport, as we all know, it's one of the most popular, but it's literally the first physical activity a child can do. You can start from a few days old.
The only sport you can do from the time you're born to the time you pass away, isn't it? The only sport.
Literally, yeah. And my big one on this, I'm sure others will agree, is it's the first one you can do. You can't go and play football as a baby. And so, you know, and if you just think about that, you hardwire those behaviours from the word go. So it's just a hugely underfunded, understood resource that the government has on their fingertips. And if they just looked at it differently, they could make a fundamental difference, not just to our industries, but society overall. And I think that's just a problem for the country generally. The importance of sport and physical recreation and activity in terms of the well-being and health of the country just is not understood at all. It's not even close.
No, I agree what everybody's saying, and I think particularly countries like Sweden, where the whole parenting is very different in terms of support from the government and how much income the parents get and how much time they can take off. It gives more opportunities to be able to do the swimming and get the right, or some kind of sport, and get the right things in place for the kids to do sport regularly into the future. Because if you start those pastimes early and those routines early, that's what you continue with. I mean, I do some kind of sport every day of the week, as do my grown-up girls and husband. So, you know, more people who do that, the better, and it'll help the health service further along the line.
So do you think, I don't know if this is a controversial thought or not, but in terms of school swimming, so I remember when I was in school, I'm sure it's wildly different now. We used to it felt like all 30 kids were in the pool at once, just trying to swim across it, hitting each other and whatever.
Yeah.
In terms of that funding, the funding around school swimming and how that works, do you think that'd be, assuming speaking to the choir, you probably think that maybe should be brought in earlier, so maybe baby swimming or toddler swimming would maybe have a bigger impact? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'd certainly support that. I don't think there's much funding at all for school swimming lessons, is there? I think it's very few and far between the children who do get to go to swim. Anyway, it's just catastrophic that I think the target is that kids can swim 25 metres by the time they leave primary school, and there's a huge proportion who can't do that, which is just wrong. So wrong.
I was going to say, I think it's a statutory requirement, isn't it? And it's just under-resourced. It just doesn't happen, full stop, and nobody enforces it.
No, it doesn't happen.
And
no.
You've got schools who've got...
Very inconsistent.
Schools don't have access to water, and they don't prioritise it, and they don't have teachers that can go and teach the lessons. So, you know...
And I can see why they don't. It's too hard, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, that's right. They say it's in the budget, but then they don't deliver, you know, so it's
it's not. I don't think it's even in the budget in a lot of places.
A lot of schools, yeah.
Julianne, I don't know if you've seen an example of this around the world as you're working in different locations, things of primary school sites with the kind of pool included in that. I'm just thinking of putting the two together. If you're going to build pools, maybe build them with the captive audience, if you like, as kind of the early entry points, or children's centres, those type of places.
Originally in the UK, a lot of schools had pools, but like many venues, they've had to close them for obvious reasons. It takes a lot of maintenance and a lot of manpower. So that was quite common in the UK, and in Australia, a lot of people are building pools in warehouses, etc. And even nurseries have got pools. A lot of nurseries here have pools. So that could be, you know, another way in which the funding can come together, an overall package, different aspects that need to be explored.
It's not high enough priority, I think, amongst and you know, there's plenty of other things that the teachers need to worry about as well. So
yeah,
it doesn't get to the top of the list, does it?
Well, we all know research. The three of us have, based our techniques on research for many, many years. But even Griffith now is proving that, you know, the benefits, the overall health benefits for children that consistently swim over 5 years, children who haven't swum and children who have swum, they're achieving academically more at school. So the knock-on effect that the well-being that swimming can create is just huge. You know, it should really be highlighted as a part of the health sector. It's a big miss.
I guess the final one is, I know obviously we're speaking to from a franchise perspective, and I know how supportive you are to your network. But in terms of those independent providers out there who might be struggling, etc., is there any advice or anything you could kind of pass on to them, or even people looking at the sector? Because I guess one of the things anyone looks at when they start a business is there a demand for it? So yes, there is, clearly. What would kind of your advice be to anyone looking at entering into the sector? You can't say buy a franchise from me.
Apart from that, it's a very rewarding career, giving somebody a skill a really important skill that they need for their life. At the end of the day, it could save their life at its most extreme, but every day it's going to help their other children and other people increase their health and mental well-being. It's a great thing to do to help others.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's rewarding, of course it is. I think from putting a business hat on now, if somebody wanted to independently come into our sector in the UK, I would really caution them about the size of the business they'd end up running. They wanted to have something of a significant size. I think that's almost an impossible challenge now. There's big players in that sector, you know, us and Joe and a few others. And as we've been saying a lot in this conversation, is that the real dearth of water space. So actually finding enough room to build a business of a substantial size on your own is very, very challenging. Not impossible, but more challenging than it ever was before. But if it's something you want to do as part of a career or semi-philanthropic reasons or a part-time role, something at that sort of level, absolutely get on board. And it is very, very rewarding.
I think rewarding is a key word for all of us, isn't it, really? It truly is a rewarding career. And I believe 2023 is about collaboration too, sharing knowledge and perhaps teaming up with other business entrepreneurs who want to create an overall business that's rewarding and profitable. You know, that's the ideal world, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Collaboration, forward thinking in 2023, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like, maybe it's just coming out of COVID, it feels like everyone's working together a lot more, collaborating and kind of sharing the resource and knowledge. Is there any way, and I don't know if you have this, but do you come together collectively to kind of lobby that? I mean, we're talking a lot about government funding, etc. Do you have that in the sector? Is it kind of one collective voice going forward, or do you kind of tap into things like UK Active or SIMSPA, those type of things?
Yeah, we operate mainly through the organisations that exist, so UK Active, Children's Activity Association, those sorts of entities, Swim England. So that's how we try and get our voice heard. But it's really challenging to get swimming heard. It's very hard.
Yeah, we're through the Swimming Teachers Association, which is the biggest in the world, I think. I'm
with STA, Swim England, and Swim Australia.
Yeah, I say that so we can reference all those in the kind of show notes. So anyone listening, they know where to go. And likewise for all of your organisations, clear the passion and the quality that you all implement. So just want to say a big thank you for myself for you to coming on today. It's great to have the kind of open conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will have taken value, and hopefully we'll start seeing loads of applicants for all those open vacancies out there.
Hope so.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.